Robert was thrown out of his own home by his son and humiliated in front of neighbors. But when a hidden locket revealed decades of sacrifices he made in silence, the truth shocked everyone and changed everything for him. Before we dive in, tell us from where you are watching this video, like and subscribe our channel. The wind cut through Robert's thin coat as if it wanted him to feel smaller than he already did. The suitcase by his feet wasn't heavy, but today it felt like a mountain. The house behind him, his house for 50 years, looked the same as always. White fence, old maple tree. The step where his son took his first wobbling steps. The window where his wife used to wave as he walked to work. Familiar, warm, safe. Not anymore. The door had been shut in his face. The lock had clicked with a final sound that told him the past was over. Inside, a new life had pushed him out. A new wife with cold eyes, new furniture that didn't remember him, and a son who no longer saw a father when he looked at him. He saw a problem, a burden, something to remove. Neighbors had started to notice. They slowed down as they passed. Some looked away. Some stared. One woman across the street pressed a hand to her mouth. Robert did not wave. He did not beg. He picked up the suitcase and set it down again because his hands would not stop shaking. But there was one thing he still held steady. Inside his pocket rested a small, tarnished silver locket. He touched it with his thumb the way you check a pulse. He never took it off. Not after she gave it to him, not after she was gone. The locket had weight, more than metal, as if it carried a memory that could still change something, if he dared to open it. A police car rolled to a stop in front of the house. The lights weren't flashing, but the whole street felt bright, exposed. Voices rose and fell by the porch. Words like trespassing and notice to vacate and disturbance floated across the cold air. People wanted this to be simple. Paperwork, rules, sign here, move along. Simple stories are easy to accept, but this story wasn't simple. Robert watched the officers step toward him. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He listened while they recited procedures. He nodded when they said he needed to leave the property. He understood. The truth was bigger than this front lawn, bigger than a notice, bigger than shame. He knew that now. He lifted the suitcase and walked past the police car. His shoes scuffed the sidewalk he once taught his son to ride a bike on. The day had been hot back then. The boy had scraped his knee and cried, and Robert had told him he was brave. The world was safe then, small, kind. That world was gone. The park a few blocks away was almost empty. A swing creaked in the wind. Robert sat down on a bench and watched the last light of the day slide down the buildings. He was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep can cure. The other kind. The kind that comes from years of holding things together that want to fall apart. His hand found the locket again. He did not open it, not yet. He held it like a secret he wasn't ready to tell, even to himself. He thought of the roof that blew off in a storm when his boy was small. He thought of the tools he sold to fix it, because a dry bed for a child matters more than a man's pride. He thought of a small piece of land by the river, where he had planned to build a quiet cabin one day. He sold that too when the hospital bills came after the crash. He had told no one, not even his son. He had made choices that cost him pieces of himself. He did it with a steady face and a soft voice, and the belief that one day it would all make sense. Maybe he had been wrong. A gust of wind rattled the trees. A group of teens passed by and looked at him the way people look at broken things in a window. Curious, a little sad, quickly bored. Robert stared at his hands. They were still strong. They had built houses. They had fixed engines. They had carried his child. They could still do something. The locket sat in his palm like a question. He clicked it open. Inside was the small wedding photo he had seen 1,000 times. 2 young faces, 2 bright futures. He slid the picture back and found the folded paper beneath it. He had never needed to read it before. He knew what it said. He knew her voice, even on paper. But now the words were more than comfort. They were something else, proof. He read the note once, then again. The handwriting was soft. The message was sharp. She had written down what he never said aloud. She had kept a record of sacrifices, not to count them, not to demand payment, but to make sure truth did not disappear. The note named dates, it named amounts, it named the land, it named the tools, it named the night they sat by a candle and decided to fix the roof and skip dinner. It named love as a kind of ledger, the only ledger that mattered. Robert folded the paper and closed the locket with care. The decision came to him the way a storm breaks after heat, sudden, clean. He stood. He left the park. He walked toward a future that would not be quiet. The next morning was paperwork and lines and windows that made him feel small. But he kept going. He asked questions. He found a clerk who listened. He found a copy of the land sale from years ago. He found the bank records from the hospital days. He found the receipt from the pawn shop where he sold his father's tools and asked for them back. Later, too ashamed to explain why he couldn't afford to redeem them. The records were not perfect, but they were enough. He did not have a lawyer. He had proof. He had a story that could not be told in one sentence. He had a locket with a note. When he filed his response to the eviction claim, the clerk raised her eyebrows at the locket and the faded receipts. She looked at his eyes. Something in them convinced her that the paper, though old, spoke truth. She stamped the page. She told him the date. He thanked her and walked outside into bright winter sun. Robert went home, not to the house, but to a friend's couch for the night. He slept like a man before a long climb. The courthouse smelled like paper and cleaning fluid. The room was crowded. Robert sat alone with his suitcase at his feet and the locket in his pocket. Across the aisle, his son sat with a lawyer who looked confident and expensive. The son's face was set in stone. The new wife sat with her arms folded, her expression tight. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Silence fell like a blanket that didn't quite cover the corners. The lawyer's opening was neat. He talked about property and rights and notices posted on time. He framed the case as simple. An elderly man refusing to leave a house that was no longer his. Compassion, yes, but rules first. He did not look at Robert when he spoke. He did not need to. On paper, he had already won. Simple stories are easy to win, until they aren't. Robert did not give a speech when it was his turn. He didn't have to. He placed the locket on the table. He slid the note out and handed it up. He placed the receipts. He placed the record of the land sale. He placed a photograph of the old roof with a blue tarp, dated in the corner, and a bank slip from the same week, with a withdrawal that matched the cost of repairs, written on the back in his wife's handwriting. The courtroom got very, very quiet. The judge read the note. She studied the receipts. She asked questions, not to trap him, but to understand. When she touched the edge of the paper with the hospital charges, her face changed. Something in the room shifted. The lawyer's file did not have this story inside it. It had ownership. It did not have inheritance of a different kind. Robert's proof did not argue the deed. It argued the foundation. It argued what the house was built on: a father's choices that no one saw, a mother's record of love that no one knew existed. It argued the truth behind the glass. The son kept staring at the floor. He seemed older than he had yesterday, or maybe just smaller. But then the judge asked a question no one expected. Where is the land now? The clerk fetched a file. Numbers appeared, old numbers, new numbers. A simple line told a complicated story. The small riverside plot Robert had sold for pennies during the hardest year had turned into a gold border around a new development 5 years later. Its value had climbed like a ladder into the sky. It had made someone rich. It had not been him. A shock went through the room, not because of the money itself, but because the cost of his choice had been so much bigger than anyone knew. The land was gone. The cabin dream was gone. He had given it away to keep his son alive. The judge set the papers down. The bench looked like a scale. On one side, ownership; on the other, obligation. One was written by law. The other was written by love. The room waited to see which one weighed more today. But before she spoke, something else happened. A woman stood up from the back row. She was one of the neighbors, the one who had covered her mouth the day Robert was turned away. She asked to speak. The judge hesitated, then nodded. The woman did not tell a long story. She told a small one. Years ago, her car would not start on a winter morning. She was late for work. Her baby had a fever. Robert had appeared from across the street with jumper cables and a thermos of hot tea. He refused money. He waved it away with a smile. He said, "Get the baby warm." He did not remember this, she said. But she did. That was the thing about a life like Robert's. It was made of tiny bridges he built for other people and never walked back across. The room began to murmur as others remembered small acts that had felt like air on hard days. A mailbox fixed, a fence mended, groceries carried when the snow was high. Each memory was nothing on its own. Together they were a shape. They were a man. The judge lifted her hand and the room fell silent. She spoke slowly. She said the law is a straight line, but justice is sometimes a circle. And today, the circle had to close. She said a house is more than a deed and less than a person. And when the two conflict, the court must look deeper. She said that while the deed named one owner, the history named another kind of right, one earned by sacrifice and recorded in a note kept close to a heart for decades. Her order did not erase the deed. It did something stricter. It imposed a constructive trust on the property in favor of Robert. The word sounded technical, but what it meant was simple. The son could not throw the father out of what the father had built with his life. The house would be held for Robert's benefit. He would live there. He would be safe. The son's name could stay on paper. The father's name would stay on the door. A hush fell, then a breath, then the softest sound of hands meeting hands, like rain starting. Not celebration, relief. Robert's shoulders lowered just a little. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He breathed. Outside the courthouse, the winter sun sat low and white. He walked down the steps without hurry. He passed the neighbor who had spoken up for him. She touched his sleeve. He nodded. No words, they were not needed. At the curb, a car door opened. Not a fancy car, just an ordinary one. The driver he knew from the old days waved him in, said nothing, and drove him back to the street where everything had fallen apart. As they turned the corner, people came out. The woman with the mailbox, the man with the fence, even the teens who had stared at him in the park, now silent and curious. The house looked the same, white fence, maple tree. the step that remembered small shoes. He stood at the gate and did not move. The new wife watched from the window. Her face was different now, not kind, not cruel, just uncertain. The son opened the door. He did not speak. Robert walked past him in silence and placed the suitcase by the hall table where family pictures used to stand. The air inside the house had changed, or maybe it was always this way, and no one had noticed. He took the locket from his pocket and set it on the table as if it needed a rest. He looked around. The furniture was new, but the floors were old. He could hear them the way a piano tuner hears a string. He knew where the wood was tired and where it still sang. He knew this house like a friend he had carried through storms. He did not ask for apologies. He did not ask for promises. He moved slowly down the hallway to the room that used to be his. It had been painted a cold gray. He opened the window a little to let the house breathe. Later, after the neighbors drifted away and the light faded, the son stood in the doorway of that room. He did not come in. He did not speak. He leaned his head against the frame the way a boy leans when he is tired and does not want to show it. Robert watched him for a long time. He thought of all the nights he had watched this same shape in the doorway from the other side, listening for a cough, waiting for a fever to break, counting breaths. He did not say, "I forgive you." He did not say, "You hurt me." He did not say, "You are my son." He let the quiet carry the weight. Some truths grow stronger when nobody tries to lift them. Days passed, papers were signed, the trust was filed, the locks were not changed again. The neighbors stopped whispering and started waving like before. The teens shoveled the sidewalk without being asked. The new wife kept to herself. The son went to work and came home earlier than he used to. Sometimes he stood in the yard at night and looked up at the maple tree like it might answer a question he was not ready to ask. Robert fixed the loose board on the back steps. He tightened the kitchen faucet so it wouldn't leak. He oiled the hinges that squeaked on the pantry door. Small jobs, easy but important. The house thanked him in its own way, with fewer noises, warmer corners, and that quiet feeling a place has when it knows it's being cared for. One afternoon, he walked to the pawn shop with a list in his pocket. The owner had changed, but the ledger had not. It still remembered the tools that had been left to cover a roof and a future. The owner found the old entry. The tools were long gone, of course, but he had something else. On a high shelf in the back, in a dusty box no one had wanted, sat a hand plane with initials cut into the handle. The letters were shallow but clear. R. Aquans. He ran his fingers over them and smiled, the smallest smile, the kind that only shows up when something lost decides to come home. He paid for it with bills he had folded carefully, not because he couldn't afford more, but because he liked the neat order of it. He walked back with the box under his arm and the winter air soft for once. In the kitchen, he set the plane on the table next to the locket. Two old things that had outlived storms. That night, he sat in the living room where a new couch had replaced an old one. He closed his eyes and heard the sound of a baby laughing from years ago. He heard the pop of nails in new wood. He heard the whisper of his wife's voice saying good night. He opened his eyes and watched the sun pass by the doorway, pause, and turn back. Their eyes met. No speech, no big moment. Just a quiet understanding that did not need decoration. The street moved on. People forgot the court date, but remembered the feeling. The house kept its secrets and told them only to those who listened. The maple tree bent in the wind and stayed standing. Robert learned to sleep again. He learned to rest without waiting for a knock that would take everything away. The locket stayed on the table. He did not wear it every day now. He did not need to. The truth inside it had done its work. It had turned a story people wanted to make simple into the kind that changes how a whole block looks at itself. It had reminded a son of where he came from. It had reminded a street that dignity is not something you grant to people. It is something you recognize. And if a stranger ever walked by and wondered why an old man with steady hands looked like someone who had won a battle, the neighbors could tell them. Not with fancy words, not with long speeches, just with this. He was thrown out, he walked away, he came back with proof. And when the world tried to measure him by a deed, he made it weigh a lifetime instead. Because a house can be bought, but a home has to be built. And sometimes the strongest part of a home is a small note folded in a locket, kept close for years, opened at the exact moment the truth is needed most.